Well, greetings, everybody, and welcome back to our Voices of Hispanic and Latin American Faith Freedom. My name is Charles Watson, and I'm the Director of Education at BJC. And I am so excited to have with me today Dr. Juhem Navarro-Rivera, and he is the Research Director, Political Research Director, and Managing Partner at Socioanalitica Research. And I'm happy to have him today with this because we always try to bring new voices into our Voices series, people that maybe BJC has never connected with before, but also maybe voices that our BJC community has never heard before. And Juhem, I am so thankful for you accepting our request and you being here today with us.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and to talk about these important issues.
Yes. So we'll jump right in. You know, last week I was able to speak with some of our former BJC fellows as they talked about what their identity was in this community. And off the rip, I asked them this question. You know, when I first decided to do Hispanic Heritage Month, we really didn't know how to name it, how to title it. But we know we wanted to, certain people to participate. So I want to ask you, what did it mean to you, the title of the series, and what are some of the thoughts surrounding Hispanic Heritage Month? Who all does it encompass, or did you feel an invite when you hear Hispanic Heritage Month? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think in many ways, you're kind of used to the term already. You kind of know what it means. I do not prefer personally the term Hispanic. I prefer Latino, Latinx, Latin America, because it kind of encompasses, I would say, a different geography. Like if you say Hispanic heritage, I feel it's very exclusive. It kind of like refers to Hispania, Roman times, Spain, and less into what is mostly of the Latin American diaspora in the United States, which is like ranging from Mexico down to the Patagonia, essentially. And of course, some of the Southwestern and like territories and whatnot that were part of Spain and later Mexico. So I feel Latino, Latinx has become more important term these days. It reflects more of that geography. I still feel that there's no term that can truly encompass all of this because, Hispanic, I think it's just very Eurocentric. And even as someone who has like a literal Spanish last name, like Navarro, I don't feel that I come from Spain. But at the same time, I think Latin America, Latino, it's more a geographic term, that it's a little bit more inclusive in that sense, and a lot of different people of different origins, whether European, Native American, and African, occupy those spaces. And so when I think about Latino, I think about the geography, not about like the blood.
Okay. I like that. Everybody has their different thing. I feel so enriched by, understanding and trying to understand, hearing from you. You broke it down in geography. Other people broke it down in sort of an ethnicity or race or nationality standpoint. And so for you to break it down with geography is an interesting concept, but it's a real concept that people need to understand. There's a difference in those things. So how do you think being recognized as your identity and being and defining your identity, how has that informed your worldview, and how is your identity be perceived by others, preconceived by others? Maybe just by looking at you or any way like that. How has your identity informed your worldview, and again, how have other people preconceived that worldview or your identity?
Yeah, I mean, with my Latino identity, I think, it plays into various stereotypes I remember going when I was back in grad school in Connecticut, like, going to stores and being confused by the staff and stuff like that. I think in terms of my humanist identity, I think it has been the fact that most people, look at me. I don't know if they immediately assume that I'm Puerto Rican, but certainly they assume I'm Latino, Hispanic. And so there's immediately going into usually the Catholic, but overall like a Christian, an assumption that I'm some sort of Christian is not specifically Catholic. And I mean, in my 20s, I'll probably get really angry about it. I just get miffed these times as I grown older, but it also, in many ways, like, it has affected the way I think of the world, like how I present myself as a humanist in this community. And a lot of my research, particularly my research in grad school, was into that, like, into Latinidad and like, these, how you build this like Latino identity and how you build a political movement out of it, and what are those markers? And to me, religion wasn't one of those, even though like for a lot of like cultural scholars it was, like, like these like Christian faith and whatnot. It's like, but I thought that was very exclusive. And instead I've been focusing more on like, especially for people of a certain age, like my generation in their 40s, like there's a lot of cultural markers that have nothing to do with religion, which we can relate to. So for my wife is from Mexico. I'm from Puerto Rico. We didn't grow up anywhere close to each other, but the pervasiveness of Mexican popular culture where I was growing up means that, we have a lot of things to talk and have a lot of common references, and vice versa in terms of like Puerto Rican, like pop culture, like, bands and singers and artists that are probably more relevant to our, religious backgrounds. And so I think that has been shaping my worldview in my later years. Has been looking at, how Latinx humanists and other non-religious folk fit into this vast, larger Latinidad, where they can feel part of that they realize that they know they're part of this community, but they do not share the religious identity of most people. And what can make, that religion it's just a small part of like a lot of cultural sensitivities and a lot of cultural traditions are out there.
Right. It's, I like to joke around and have fun with this. You kind of said, people seeing you and thinking you were in the Christian faith or thinking, and I grew up watching sports. So for me, when I think of Mexico, when I think of Puerto Rico, I think of boxers. I think of great fighters and great boxers. So it's not the thing. It's so much more to it than just considering somebody's, like you said, like religion was a part of it, but it may not be the main part. It may not even be a part of it at all when you're doing your research in that. But you kind of alluded to it a little bit when you said you being a humanist inside of the Latinx community, a Latin American community. Can you kind of give us a breakdown of some of the research that you said, the numbers of, because I was totally shocked about the numbers that you were giving me when we were talking on the pre-call about, how many people are in the community are maybe humanists or don't believe in the faith, a Christian faith, or give us some of the breakdowns of some of your research and what's been going on with that.
Yes. So, I didn't know this either. Like when I started doing this, and I started this a little bit by serendipity, I was a grad student at the University of Connecticut, got a job at Trinity College as a research fellow, and with the team who was releasing the 2008 American Religious Identification Survey. And by that time, I already had like a firmly strong, not humanist, but atheist identity. I was in those days, I was still into new atheism and whatnot. And I was assuming that I was alone. Like there's no, like, maybe some token atheist Latino somewhere in another part of the country that I will never meet,
Mhm.
and me. And when we get the numbers back, it's like, 12% of Latinos are non-religious. Of course, not all of them are atheists, agnostic, no, that's a smaller percentage. But even the people who identified as atheists and agnostics was more than every other non-Christian religion combined.
Wow.
And so, I just, it dawned on me, okay, like there's something happening in here. And over the years, then I joined PRI later in that decade, and worked with them for almost 3 years. And so I continue, and there was where I doing my dissertation research, which wasn't specifically about religion, but it had a religion component as this marker of culture. And over the years, I've been tracking like all the PRI polls, and I've been writing about humanism and race, collaborating with Dr. Anthony Peen at Rice for several volumes, or Dr. Phil Zuckerman at, oh my gosh, I forgot where Phil is. Pitzer College. And yeah, so eventually, like, these numbers have grown. Like people of color, like people think about the knowns as a phenomenon of, like, keep growing, maybe 30%, 25% of the population, depending on, which surveys you count. But much of the later growth, in the last decade or so, has been from people of color. And, Latinos are about maybe almost a quarter of non-religious. African American also growing, and even the number of women. This is not a young white dude phenomenon. This is a multicultural phenomenon, and so that's what I've been focusing on, and especially like trying to look deeper into this Latinx secular experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm very intentional when I talk about it. Like usually when I do like atheist secular podcasts and interviews, I don't try to frame my experience as typical, because I don't really know if there's so much variation between like national origins, like histories of immigration, or whether like your family has been here for generations, and then really religion, like maybe in my case, it was very easy. I came from a Catholic-ish background. I just drifted away and never looked back. But then there are other people who, like, especially who come from Pentecostal churches, who are kind of like smaller and more tight knit, and it's family and friends who are like like the congregation. And that's that's more harder and more traumatic than just going to the back of the pew, sitting on the back of the pews, and like not know the priest doesn't notice that you leave.
Right.
That and so that's one of the things. Like when people ask me, like, what is the experience of a secular Latino? It's like I can't generalize, because there's like many different experiences, as very many different Latinos, and so like mine is very non-traumatic, but I don't know if I'm typical. I may be, because most of the Latinos who have left religion are former Catholics. And so maybe my experience is typical in the sense that it's just people who stop going to church and then stop labeling themselves as Catholic. But I think we need more qualitative research into looking at how people are living, and their relationship to religion, but that's not the kind of research I do. So if there's some enterprising scholar who want to do that,
yeah, I think, like you said, in almost every community, this is happening, and it's growing, and there has to be some. I wouldn't say it has to be an answer to it, but it's good to know what's behind it, and what motivates it, and also still being connected with that, the human side of it, no matter what led somebody to not be in a church or be in any type of religion, or led them from it or led them to it. All of that is still the human experience, the human lived experience. And I know that your research and stuff and study of the political climate and has race and religion influenced our political atmosphere more during the time you have been doing your research. We all know it's a part of it, but I want to know from your experience and from your research, how much has race and religion influenced our political atmosphere that we have?
One of the things I mentioned many years ago that I would say in conversation with people is that I remember, the mid 2000s, early 2010s, when all these census figures were coming about like the incoming like minority majority country, and people were like, and Texas turning blue and whatnot, because we are gonna make we as Latinos gonna make Texas blue, and whatnot. And one of the things that I was always skeptical of that, because I can speak of this as a double threat. Like, we have a country that was becoming more black and brown, and we have a country that was becoming more secular. And to a lot of people in power or in the periphery of power, that was a dangerous proposition. And so like every time I heard that, we just wait until like 2040 when the numbers switch and everything's gonna, I was like, yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
Right.
It's not gonna be that easy. And I think unfortunately time has proven me right.
Right.
I think my former colleague Robbie Jones has put it right well in this how white Christian America is kind of like reacting to the changes that are happening in the country, and you could see it happen. And when I was in PRI with Robbie, like we could track this, but this is not just a matter of opinion; it's also a matter of action. They have been actively involved in trying to limit the power of these groups, and using power to limit the potential political ascendancy. And so it doesn't surprise me. I think I've always knew that there was a lot of danger in there. It's interesting how I started doing religion as an academic interest was when I was in college. I took a class on religion and politics in the US. And I started reading about all these names that I know, kind of like, in the background TV, like you'll hear like the 700 Club and stuff like that. When you were growing up, you're not paying attention to it. But all of a sudden, like, oh, these Pat Robertson guys, oh, these guys. And so, and when I was in high school, like one of my best friends, like converted to a very like conservative evangelical congregation. And so I started reading, or at least listening, about like Tim LaHaye and Left Behind and whatnot, like getting chick tracks. So I got I got exposed to a lot of these things that I found interesting and disturbing.
Right.
As I'm growing up, but I don't have any academic background or anything at that point, and it just stuck on the back of my head. And when it's like started putting things together, I kind of like I just got an interest of in the Christian right, and then when I develop or finally like get this secular identity that was blossoming, like finally, whatever, I'm gonna like I'm an atheist. I cannot lie to myself. I think it took another turn in the sense that, I kind of like started understanding all their fears about secular humanism and all of that. And I would say in the same, and so I started looking at it as a religious liberty issue, like in the sense that, I'm as an atheist, like, these people are trying to impose Christianity. And then I started looking at my life, like very differently because as a Latino, you start realizing that a lot of, especially like Robertsons, I think it's more famously because like encroaching into Latin America, particularly Central America, and so a lot of these like white Christian theology has been encroaching into our regions, and essentially like whether it's supporting dictators or creating acolytes that are grabbing into power in different countries, or like in my case, like growing up in Puerto Rico, seeing kind of like these nascent like right wing ecumenical right wing of like conservative Catholics, conservative evangelicals that are putting aside their theological differences to keep some people down. I think it is incumbent of us, those of us who actually believe in religious liberty, in the religious liberty of allowing people to worship freely or not worship at all, to kind of like counteract this fake religious liberty of yes, religious liberty for us.
Right. I think, yeah, I don't know. You rolled that into everything, to even through your history and learning about it beforehand and hearing about it, and then well, wait a minute, is this that bad? And I think that kind of is how some people have come into Christian nationalism, to understand, oh, wait a minute, is that bad? Is it? What's wrong with being patriotic? And what's wrong with being Christian? And what's wrong with putting together and hoping everybody is like that? And then you realize, wait a minute, if you're trying to make everybody the same, there's a problem there, because we're not the same. We're human, and we have brains, and we can think, and we can go through the process on our own. But to force somebody to be one way, or to say you're not as good because you're not this, means there's a lack of respect for the humanity in that. So the question I would like to bring to you, even as a humanist, I would say, what's the biggest religious liberty issue, maybe surrounding the Hispanic, Latin American, Latinx community, or even bring it even closer to you? What would you say is the biggest religious liberty issue as a humanist? What stands out to you?
Yeah, I think personally, I think it's this issue of Christian nationalism. I think it has become something that is not just a church-state issue. Like I think many secular people think about it in a way, legalistic church and state matter, but the notions of race and gender are in there, and I think they're a big threat to the country in terms of how a pluralistic multiracial society can thrive if we got a leadership that essentially is like promoting a particular brand of Christianity that it's highly exclusive. I think it goes beyond the legal aspect of separation of church and state, and goes more into the into cultural aspects, and also in respect of life of others. And I think the last 5 years have been eye-opening in that regard, in which separation of church and state has become more than just that narrow legal aspect of should we give tax exemptions to clergy, or rather a wider aspect of how people are using a certain definition and a certain interpretation of their religious belief to impose it on everybody else. That goes beyond crosses in schools or prayers or and into the and creating a hierarchy of human beings.
Right, right. I try to simplify stuff in my mind when I talk to groups of, as you were speaking, I was saying, you know what I hear and what I translate that into is, true religious liberty is something that should encompass more people. Whenever your religious liberty starts to narrow the number of people it has in it, then it's not religious liberty, because it's getting smaller. If your group is getting smaller that you're protecting, or your group is getting smaller that it allows in or allows for the same rights, it can't be religious liberty. It can't be, because religious liberty should encompass more people than just a smaller amount of people with that. Would you say that would be how you would think of it in your mind as well?
In a way, I think you're right, and the other aspect is like, your definition of religious liberty can be so, and I'm talking on the other side of the coin. It's like, right. You're defining fewer people, and you're using the power of the state to actually boost yourself. And I think that's the defining religious freedom issue of our day. It's essentially trying to create a state religion through the back door, or actually kind of like busting the front door now.
So it's gotten to the point where it's pretty straightforward. It's not hiding in the back. It's pretty straightforward. So, well, I do have one more question that I didn't put on the list and stuff for it, but I was thinking through it. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of people that maybe don't understand humanists or don't understand people without a faith tradition. Is there anything that you would like? Because we are BJC, we are Baptist Church, we have a lot of people that follow us that have a faith tradition. Is there anything you would like to share about the humanist community, or agnostic community or atheist community, whichever one you feel comfortable speaking on, or from yourself, that you wish those that have a faith tradition or follow a religious tradition would know about you and about your community? Is there something that's a myth that needs to be put away or done away with?
We don't need babies, but other than that, I would say one of the things is that most people who have any type of secular identity generally want to live alone or be left alone. Like, there's not much against religion. And I would say most people don't have anything about religious people. They're very negative there's a lot of negativity toward institutional religion. I think it has a lot, especially from people who come from religious background. That's certainly true. There's people who harbor a lot of trauma, and I don't think that should be. I think we should be sensitive to that. I think Chris's group has written particularly well about that in terms of kind of like proselytizing the people who have living religions and whatnot. So I think most people are sympathetic to the idea of religious liberty, and they don't really want to infringe on your right to worship. And I think I'm using this opportunity. I think I was glad that I was invited here to these conversations, because I think humanists and other secular Americans should be in these conversations and these alliances with religious groups that want to defend actual religious liberty, because it's incumbent on all of us to, the same way that certain brands of Christianity have set aside their theological differences in order to to gain a stronghold in the halls of power. I think our similarities as Americans and as defense and as lovers of freedom go beyond whether we worship or not. And so, I think that that's what I would say, that we also consider religion a very private matter. And but I think, especially given the rising numbers of this population, that in many ways, according to some studies, is actually thanks to the rise of the religious right, who has turned a lot of people away from religion, that we are not the enemy, we're a symptom of a greater problem.
Okay, I like that. I'm glad I gave you the opportunity to expound on that and give people a little bit of insight. I know you don't speak for the entire community, secular community, but to give them a little insight and so that we can learn from that. And so, I am so glad that we did invite you to have this short conversation with us, but I also want to let you know that we want you to be back around us and stay associated with us in the future here. And we look forward to working with you more in the future, and hope that, give you a chance to share maybe some of your social media, some of your things, if some of the people want to follow you or want to follow some of the research you've been doing. You want to share any of your website or share your social media handles for that?
Yeah, my own social media, I'm not that active these days, but every once in a while I get a hot take. It's at JuhemNR, so JUHEM, I forgot how to spell my name, JUHEMNR. And then Socioanalitica, if you want to see some of the research we're doing. We're particularly, a lot of our clients are like Black-led nonprofits, and so we do a lot of research with nonprofit clients. It's at Socioanalitica, and some of those, we have some surveys coming out. And yeah, you can follow us also in Facebook and Instagram for charts mostly.
Gotcha.
But the only public one I have personally is the UMNR at Twitter. That's mostly, and socioanalitica.com.
All right. But hey, well, thank you again for this time. I look forward to talking to you again in the future. And thanks everybody for joining us for our series, this Voices of Hispanic and Latin American Faith Freedom. You can find all of our series on our website, bjconline.org/Facebook Live. All of our conversations that we've had this year are there. Until the next time we have this again, thank you again, Juhem, and thank everybody else for joining us.
Thank you, Charles.